Have you ever experienced that confusing situation where a woman seems to be pulling away, yet somehow keeps coming back into your life? Maybe she told you she's not interested, but then texts you at 2 a.m. asking how you're doing. Or perhaps she ended things between you, but still watches every single one of your social media stories. Today, I want to dive deep into this puzzling behavior that leaves so many men scratching their heads and wondering what's really going on. I remember sitting across from a client who was visibly frustrated. "I don't get it," he said, his voice a mixture of confusion and hope. "She told me she doesn't want a relationship, but she keeps reaching out. She's sending mixed signals, and I don't know what to believe anymore." This conversation wasn't unique. I've heard variations of it hundreds of times throughout my coaching career, and I realized there's a pattern here that needs to be addressed. The truth is, human connection is complicated. When it comes to letting go, there's often a vast difference between what we say and what we actually do. So today I'm going to share with you the psychological mechanisms at play when a woman says she's not interested but can't seem to let you go. Understanding these dynamics isn't about manipulation or game playing. It's about gaining clarity so you can make informed decisions about your relationships and emotional well-being. Before we dive in, I want you to know that this isn't about generalizing all women. Every person is unique with their own motivations, fears, and desires. But certain patterns of behavior stem from universal human psychology, and recognizing these patterns can help you navigate confusing situations with more confidence and less emotional turmoil. The first reason why women sometimes can't let go, even when they're not interested romantically, is what psychologists call the security blanket effect. We all crave emotional security, and once we've established a connection with someone who provides that feeling of safety, it becomes incredibly difficult to sever that tie completely. I've seen this countless times in my practice. Someone might genuinely believe they're not romantically compatible with you, but the comfort and security you provide keeps drawing them back. Think about it like this. Even when we outgrow a childhood blanket or stuffed animal, many of us still feel a twinge of comfort when we see it or hold it. That's because our brains formed strong associations between that object and feelings of safety. The same happens in relationships. You may have become her emotional safe space, and even if her conscious mind has decided you're not the one, her subconscious mind struggles to let go of that security. This creates a situation where she might reach out during moments of stress, loneliness, or uncertainty, not because she's playing games, but because her brain is seeking that familiar comfort you once provided. It's an automatic response, like reaching for a chocolate bar when you're feeling down. The chocolate might not solve the underlying issue, but it provides temporary relief. Another powerful factor at play is the fear of finality. Ending something permanently requires a level of certainty that many people simply don't have. I've worked with countless individuals who keep connections alive because they're afraid of making a decision they might later regret. It's human nature to want to keep our options open, especially in today's world where we're constantly bombarded with the message that something better might be just around the corner. This fear of closing doors permanently creates what I call the maybe someday syndrome. She might think, maybe I'm not interested now, but what if my feelings change in the future? What if I realize he was right for me all along? This uncertainty keeps her tethered to you, checking in just enough to maintain the connection without fully committing to rebuilding the relationship. The psychology behind this behavior goes even deeper when we consider the concept of intermittent reinforcement. This is one of the most powerful behavioral conditioning mechanisms known to psychology. When rewards come unpredictably, sometimes yes, sometimes no, the behavior becomes extremely difficult to extinguish. Think about slot machines. They don't pay out every time, but the possibility that they might keeps people pulling the lever. In relationship dynamics, a woman who isn't sure about her feelings might unconsciously create this pattern. She pulls away, then comes back with warmth and attention, then pulls away again. This inconsistent pattern actually strengthens your attachment to her, making it harder for you to move on. And here's the surprising part. The same mechanism works on her too. The unpredictable nature of your responses to her intermittent attention creates a powerful psychological hook that keeps her coming back, even when she's convinced herself she's not interested. I've seen strong, intelligent individuals reduced to constantly checking their phones because someone who claimed to not want a relationship sent them a casual "hey" text after weeks of silence. That single text, that tiny bit of attention, triggers a dopamine rush that reinforces the connection. It's not about weakness, it's about human psychology and how our brains are wired. There's also what I call the familiarity comfort zone. Humans naturally gravitate toward the familiar, even when it's not necessarily good for us. We've all heard the saying, better the devil you know than the devil you don't. This principle applies powerfully to relationships. Even when someone has decided they're not interested in pursuing something deeper with you, the thought of completely eliminating your presence from their life can feel like stepping into a void. The relationship you built created patterns, inside jokes, shared references, and a unique communication style that becomes part of her identity. Letting that go completely means accepting a small death of the self, the version of herself that exists in relation to you. This creates an emotional tug of war. Her rational mind says it's time to move on, but her emotional mind clings to the familiar patterns you've established together. I've witnessed this countless times in my practice, people who keep returning to familiar relationship patterns even after deciding to end things. It's not manipulation, it's the brain's preference for the known over the unknown. The familiar provides a cognitive shortcut that requires less mental energy than forging entirely new connections. When we add social media into this mix, the effect becomes even more pronounced. In previous generations, ending a relationship usually meant a clean break. You'd stop seeing each other, maybe run into one another occasionally, but generally move on separately. Today, your digital presence remains constantly accessible. She can check your profiles, see updates about your life, and maintain a sense of connection without direct communication. This creates what psychologists call parasocial relationships, one-sided connections where one person invests emotional energy and attention without reciprocation. She might spend time looking at your posts, forming opinions about your current life, and maintaining an emotional investment without actively engaging with you. Then, when something you post triggers a strong enough emotional response, she reaches out, creating that confusing pattern of distance punctuated by sudden interest. The ego also plays a significant role in why women sometimes can't let you go even when they're not interested. There's a natural human tendency to want to be wanted. Even when someone doesn't want a relationship with you, they might still enjoy the validation that comes from knowing you desire them. This isn't necessarily conscious or malicious, it's a deeply ingrained psychological need for affirmation. I've seen this manifest in various ways. She might occasionally flirt just to see if she still has that effect on you, or bring up shared memories to remind you of the connection you once had. These behaviors aren't about rekindling the relationship, they're about reassuring herself that she still holds value in your eyes. It's a way of boosting self-esteem without the intention of following through on the interest she's encouraging. This connects to what psychologists call the scarcity principle. We value what we perceive as rare or potentially unavailable. When she senses you're moving on, her brain might signal that something valuable is slipping away, triggering renewed interest. This doesn't mean she's suddenly decided she wants a relationship. It could simply be a reactive response to the perceived loss of your attention. Another fascinating psychological factor is the unfinished business phenomenon. Our brains are wired to seek closure and completion. When relationships end without clear resolution, they leave psychological loose ends that our minds continuously try to tie up. This is why she might reach out months later with seemingly random questions or observations. Her brain is still processing the relationship and seeking that sense of completion. This tendency is so strong that researchers have found unfinished tasks stay more prominent in memory than completed ones, a phenomenon known as the Zeigarnik effect. If your relationship ended ambiguously or suddenly, her mind might keep returning to it, trying to make sense of what happened. These mental loops can prompt her to maintain contact even when she's decided she doesn't want to pursue the relationship further. Then there's what I call the emotional insurance policy. Humans naturally try to minimize risk and maximize security, even when someone has decided they don't want to be with you romantically. Completely severing ties feels risky. What if they need emotional support in the future? What if circumstances change? This creates a tendency to keep connections on a low simmer rather than turning off the heat entirely. I've observed this countless times. Someone will decide to end a romantic relationship, but will work to maintain a friendship that preserves many of the emotional benefits of the relationship without the commitment. This isn't necessarily calculated, it's a subconscious risk management strategy. Having people who understand us and care about us is essential for emotional well-being, and completely cutting ties with someone who provided that understanding feels threatening on a primal level. The complexity of modern dating adds another layer to this behavior. With so many potential connections available through dating apps and social media, many people develop what psychologists call choice paralysis. When faced with too many options, humans often become less satisfied with any single choice and more likely to keep multiple possibilities open. This creates situations where someone may tell you they're not interested, while simultaneously maintaining just enough connection to keep you as a potential option. I've coached many individuals through the frustration of dealing with someone who seems to pop in and out of their lives unpredictably. One moment they're saying they need space, the next they're reaching out with conversation that feels intimate and engaged. This inconsistency isn't always intentional game playing. Sometimes it reflects genuine confusion about what they want and fear of making the wrong choice. There's also a powerful psychological mechanism at work called the mere ownership effect. Once we consider something or someone ours, in some way we tend to value them more highly. This applies to relationships as well. Once someone has been your person, letting go completely means accepting a loss. Even when she knows intellectually that the relationship isn't right, this sense of ownership can make it difficult to fully release the connection. This ownership effect combines with what psychologists call loss aversion, the tendency to prefer avoiding losses over equivalent gains. In relationship terms, this means the pain of losing a connection often feels more intense than the pleasure of forming a new one. Even when she's not interested in maintaining a romantic relationship, the prospect of losing you completely can trigger this aversion response, prompting her to maintain just enough contact to prevent complete disconnection. I've also observed the influence of social expectations on this behavior. Despite significant progress in gender equality, many women are still socialized to be relationship maintainers. From an early age, girls are often taught to prioritize harmony, maintain connections, and take responsibility for the emotional well-being of others. This socialization can make it difficult to make a clean break, even when continuing contact causes confusion. This social conditioning intersects with genuine compassion. If she cares about you as a person, even if she doesn't want a romantic relationship, completely cutting you off might feel cruel or unnecessary. This creates a situation where she's trying to balance her need for distance with her desire not to hurt you, resulting in those confusing mixed messages that leave you wondering where you stand. The digital age has also transformed how we process endings. In previous generations, relationship transitions were often marked by clear physical separation, moving out, returning belongings, no longer seeing each other. Today, digital connections remain intact unless deliberately severed, creating an ambiguous relationship status that can persist for months or even years after the active relationship has ended. This digital persistence means she sees updates about your life, remembers your birthday when social media notifies her, and maintains passive awareness of your activities. These digital touch points can trigger emotional responses that prompt her to reach out, even when she's intellectually committed to moving on from the relationship. Behavior is rarely straightforward, especially when it comes to matters of the heart. The push-pull dynamic you might be experiencing often reflects internal conflict rather than intentional game playing. She might genuinely believe she's not interested, while simultaneously feeling drawn to the connection you shared. This isn't necessarily manipulation, it's the complex reality of human emotions and attachment. Understanding these psychological mechanisms doesn't excuse behavior that leaves you confused or hurt. It does, however, provide context that might help you respond from a place of clarity rather than reactivity. Recognizing these patterns allows you to make conscious choices about how you engage, rather than being caught in an emotional roller coaster of hopes raised and dashed. So, what can you do if you find yourself in this situation? First, recognize that clarity rarely comes from external sources. You might keep hoping that she'll finally make up her mind and either commit fully or disappear completely, but the ambiguity might continue indefinitely if you don't establish boundaries. Second, be honest with yourself about what you're truly seeking. Are you holding on because you genuinely believe the relationship has potential? Or because the intermittent connection is serving as a placeholder, preventing you from moving forward? I've worked with many clients who realized they were staying stuck in these ambiguous connections because the alternative, facing the unknown of being truly single or opening themselves to new relationships, felt more frightening than the familiar pain of inconsistency. The comfort of the known, even when it's unsatisfying, often overrides the potential of the unknown. When you understand the psychological forces at play, you gain the power to make conscious choices rather than simply reacting to the situation. You can decide whether to establish clearer boundaries, have an honest conversation about the mixed messages, or perhaps take a complete break to gain perspective. The key is moving from confusion to clarity, from passivity to intentional choice. The journey forward begins with self-awareness. Notice how these interactions affect your emotional state, your self-esteem, and your ability to focus on other aspects of your life. Pay attention to patterns rather than individual moments of connection. Is there a cycle of distance and closeness that repeats? Do her reach-outs coincide with specific triggers, like seeing you move forward or sensing your attention shifting elsewhere? Remember that understanding someone's behavior doesn't obligate you to accept it. You can have compassion for the psychological mechanisms driving her actions while still choosing what's healthiest for your own well-being. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do, both for yourself and for her, is to provide the clarity that ambiguity prevents. In my years of coaching, I've seen remarkable transformations when people finally step out of these confusing dynamics. The energy that was once consumed by analyzing mixed messages becomes available for growth, new connections, and pursuit of goals. The mental space previously occupied by uncertainty fills with possibility. This conversation is far from complete. There's so much more to explore about the psychology of attachment, the complexity of modern relationships, and the path to creating healthy boundaries while maintaining compassion. In fact, we're just scratching the surface of understanding why women sometimes can't let go, even when they say they're not interested. Next time, we'll dive deeper into strategies for navigating these situations with emotional intelligence and self-respect.